Hello, Pack. I've been watching Encanto a few times now, and I absolutely love how this movie takes a perfect family and shows not only the difficulties that perfect family may have, but also how they manage to handle those issues that come up. Abuela grieves for her husband Pedro by making the entire family utilize their miracle, utilize their gifts in order to help the village to keep the miracle alive.
We swear to always help those around us and earn the miracle that somehow found us.
Luisa hides her stress by continuing to work as hard as she can. The harder she works, the more she can suppress that stress that she feels.
Mirabel and I were having this little talk about me carrying too much, so I tried not to carry so much, but I realized it was putting me behind, and I knew I was gonna let everyone down.
And Isabella takes that stress and attempts not to go against the grain, to create as little friction as possible so that there's as little stress as possible.
I never wanted to marry him. I was doing it for the family.
But there's one person in the family Madrigal that handled their issues by removing themselves from that stressor. And that person is Bruno. And I think we're led to believe through the movie that the only person that knows that Bruno is still living in the Casita after removing himself from the issue is Delores.
Yo, I knew he never left. I heard him every day.
This line always stood out to me as odd. You see her finding out about Mirabel's vision, or the vision about Mirabel, and she can barely hold that information in for a few minutes at dinner before she immediately tells Camillo, which then causes the family gossip to spread all the way down to Abuela. But we're supposed to believe that she knew Bruno was living within the Casita for 10 years, and she never told anybody in the house. Which got me thinking, did Delores really not tell anybody else? Or did she? Did she at one point tell somebody, therefore other people in the Casita also knew that Bruno lived at the Casita? Let's talk about that.
Okay, so we gonna talk about Bruno.
So when watching Encanto, I thought it very impressive that no one else for 10 years had managed to stumble upon Bruno or the hole in the wall covered by a picture that Bruno had managed to dig next to Dolores' door. It made sense that, Dolores knew about Bruno, especially since he seemed to have dug a hole right next to her door. She would be the one that would hear him for the next 10 years anyways, might as well do the most noisy piece of construction, the digging of the door, right next to her door as well, just to get that out of the way. But again, I don't think Delores could have kept that secret for 10 years. Somebody else in the family had to know. And that's when I stumbled upon the TikTok series from Andy Dandy 26, where he goes into depth about how he believes Felix and Augustine knew Bruno was living in the walls. And while I don't believe that he's correct in the fact that, Bruno always joined them for a guy's night every once in a while, I do believe Bruno told other people about the vision, thus them knowing that he was still in the Casita. We're going to go ahead and bring up a picture of the family Madrigal, and we're going to go through and see which of them I believe knew that Bruno lived in the Casita and which ones were likely oblivious. So we are left with 11 people who are in the Madrigal family. Two of them that we can mark off really quickly are going to be Camillo. Camillo did not know that Bruno was living in the Casita. If he did, he was able to feign it very well, even after Delores informs him that she knew the entire time.
Yo, I knew he never left. I heard him every day.
He's the one that's like, oh, I guess we're going to talk about Bruno. And then when Delores mentions that she already knew, he has this very surprised look on his face. So I honestly don't believe Camillo knew that Bruno was still in the Casita or anywhere nearby. The next person we can mark off is Delores herself. As I've already mentioned, I think she knew. She wasn't just bluffing at the end. I think she knew that Bruno was still living in the Casita. And given that she knew that Bruno was living in the Casita, we're going to put her in the yes category. The next two people that knew Bruno was living in the Casita, but we're going to mark as no's, are going to both be Antonio and Mirabel. Antonio and Mirabel find out within 24 hours of each other that Bruno was living in the Casita. But again, it was during the events of the movie, and we're looking more at prior to the events of the movie, who knew that Bruno was living there. You could argue that Antonio knew before Mirabel, and that while Mirabel was chasing Bruno down the hallway and didn't know who it was, that Antonio could have been talking to the rats at that time, finding out about Bruno. And so it's still within 24 hours of each other, because the events of the dinner are supposed to happen the next day. They're supposed to be within 24 hours of Antonio's gift ceremony. So he's learned to speak to rats, and within 24 hours, Mirabel finds out about Bruno. So sometime during that 24 hours is when Antonio finds out. So they find out at the same time, but again, it's during the course of the movie. We're going to go ahead and mark them as them not knowing. Isabella was likely unaware of Bruno's existence within the Casita. And I say this because, again, she dealt with the friction in the family by not causing any additional friction. Whether she was curious about where Bruno went, or whether or not she even cared about what happened to Bruno after Mirabel's gift ceremony, she wouldn't have wanted to bring up Bruno, due to the fact that her Aunt Pepa didn't want to talk about Bruno at all. So we're gonna go ahead and say that Isabella did not know. Now, Luisa, I don't believe she knew either, but she is where this theory starts to take place on other people knowing, though, because Luisa mentions after her song Surface Pressure that the magic is breaking, and she believes that Bruno is the key to this.
But I heard the grown-ups once, before Tio Bruno left, he had like some terrible vision about it.
But we know that Abuela is the one who asks for this vision from Bruno. Bruno goes up, sees the vision, shatters it immediately, and leaves, not telling Abuela about it because he knew how it would be interpreted. Then how did Luisa hear the grown-ups talking about this vision? How did she know it was a bad vision? She doesn't have any more details than that, but she doesn't send Mirabel off to see Bruno. She doesn't go to Bruno himself once the magic starts breaking. So I don't think she's aware that Bruno is in the Casita, but she is aware that Bruno had a vision about the magic breaking, or about something bad happening to the family. And I think this is very telling that Bruno, after having the vision, talked to somebody about the vision. And I think that somebody is Augustine. Augustine, Mirabel's dad, is the one that Bruno confided in about the vision. When the house starts breaking apart and Mariano's engagement, dinner or proposal dinner doesn't go off as expected, the house starts breaking, and Abuela yells at Augustine,
You should have told me the second you saw the vision. Think of the family.
I was thinking of my daughter.
I don't think this scene is talking about that night, the fact that Augustine has seen the vision prior to the dinner, because Abuela went down to meet with Mariano and his family, walked Mariano back to the Casita. We hear in the song We Don't Talk About Bruno that it's dinner time, everyone is setting up for dinner. We've got Augustine coming up and getting Mirabel to take her down to dinner. I doubt this is the moment where Abuela wants to be interrupted in front of guests, in front of a proposal dinner, party, and been told, hey, by the way, Mirabel's the reason that the magic is breaking. I don't think this is when she's saying, you should have told me about the vision, but instead, back when you found out about it from Bruno, you should have told me. You should have told me back then what the vision was about. And he says, no, I was thinking about my daughter. He was protecting her all the way from back when Bruno had the vision. One of the key pieces to this theory is the fact that when Bruno drops the vision, we can see it shatter on a singular rock, and all the pieces are surrounding that rock. The sand does start to blow over the pieces of glass, but they don't move. The glass itself doesn't move. But when Mirabel comes up to the vision cave, we can see the pieces are scattered. They're as if they've been tossed left and right from the center of the room. As if somebody has come up here, reassembled them, seen the vision, and in hopes of no one else finding it, scattered them. And then additionally buried them further into the sand, because the sand didn't start pouring out of the ceiling until Mirabel started putting the vision together. Additionally, the arguments that the Casita may have helped conceal those pieces aren't valid because the casita doesn't work in Bruno's room.
You can't help in here?
Bruno's room has remained dormant for so long that the casita isn't able to interact with the room. So I believe that Bruno did tell Augustine about the vision, and Augustine went up to see it for himself, and after doing so, scattered the vision to stop anyone else, Abuela specifically, from finding out about the vision. And I don't think it's too far of a reach to say that either Julieta or Felix were involved in that conversation between Bruno and Augustine for two different reasons. As far as Julieta goes, it was about her daughter. It was about Mirabel. The vision was about Mirabel, and I could totally see Bruno feeling a sense of responsibility for the vision and wanting to make sure that Julieta and Augustine are both made aware of what's going to happen, so that Mirabel has the support of her family. She's seen how supportive Julieta is. Probably immediately after the door ceremony happened, the only person who probably came to Mirabel's side was her parents, because we can see how Mirabel is shunned away by Abuela and how she's shunned away by Isabella, and she's no longer a special child in this family because the house has rejected her from a gift. So the only people that were probably her support network were Julieta and Augustine, and I can see Bruno wanting to make sure both of them are aware of the vision. To me, Felix also makes sense for Bruno to have informed. Felix married into the Madrigal family. He also doesn't have any gifts. He and Augustine are both giftless. They're both powerless. And so by not having a miracle or a gift to associate with, they may be able to relate closer to Mirabel and be more relatable to Mirabel and able to help her with coping with the vision that was to come. I'm not 100% sold on that one, but it made sense to me, and it lends credence to the idea that there are people in the house that are aware of Bruno still living there. And Felix knowing that Bruno's there helps stop Camillo from trying to get into Bruno's tower. It stops Camillo from trying to ask too many questions. He probably did ask questions about his uncle Bruno, and I wouldn't put it past Felix to make up the stories, because he seems to exaggerate stories a little bit, to make up stories about his 7-foot tall uncle Bruno with rats down his back. I could see Felix trying to spin this tale to stop Camillo, the interested and inquisitive teenager that he is, from venturing into Bruno's tower, to stop him from finding that vision of Mirabel. I think regardless of if Julieta is involved in the conversation with Bruno or not, she is going to know that Bruno is still within the casita. And she's seen as the only one that's cooking throughout the entire movie, and we can see her making the little cakes. I think they're called I'm not even gonna try to pronounce them because I would mess it up, but the queso cakes for healing people. And she makes 3 of them after Mirabel slices her hand during Antonio's gift ceremony. We know that one of them is given to to Mirabel to heal her hand, but the other 2 are never seen again. But we do see Bruno living kitchen adjacent
In here, eh? Kitchen adjacent.
in his little hideaway, and he's eating one of those queso cakes, and it's I think it's a nod to the fact that Julieta knew Bruno was around. Maybe not exactly where he was, but she always left him out some food and always made sure that he had access to anything he needed. Because after 10 years of sneaking food out of the kitchen, I have to imagine that the one who's cooking all of the food and providing for the family has to know there's less food here than there was when I made it, or there's less leftovers than what there should be after everybody got food. I think she knew Bruno was there. Maybe not exactly where in the walls, but she knew. I feel like Pepa's an obvious no, and given that Felix tends to try to make her happy and wouldn't want to mention Bruno around her, I think it's very safe to say that she was not aware that Bruno was living in the casita still. But even if somebody like Delores had brought it up to her, I don't think she cared. So whether or not she knew, I think is irrelevant. She didn't care and essentially was not interested in knowing where Bruno was. And because of this, I think we can go ahead and mark Pepa as a no. She was not aware that Bruno was living in the casita. And then we have the last Madrigal that we haven't talked about yet, and that's Abuela. Did Abuela know that Bruno was still in the casita? I believe that Abuela knew that Bruno was still in the casita. And here's why. We have a rule that everybody seems to follow, that we don't talk about Bruno. But you have to wonder why that is. Why don't we talk about Bruno? In the song, it kind of makes it sound like it's because he only talks about bad things, he only gives bad predictions, and bad things happen whenever you bring up Bruno. But that's not entirely true. Like we've already discussed in our previous video, that Bruno's visions may not have all been negative, they were just interpreted as negative. But additionally, getting bad visions isn't a reason not to talk about him, especially if he's not around to give visions. Why wouldn't we ever talk about Bruno? Was it because of Pepa's wedding? I don't think so. Pepa's wedding likely happened prior to Bruno's exile at Mirabel's door ceremony. So again, sure, there might have been some tension there, but I can't imagine that is why no one's allowed to talk about Bruno. But I do think that Abuela, after she asked for a vision about Mirabel from Bruno, realized that Bruno left without telling her, that he probably did see the vision and decided to leave without telling her what the vision was. And she felt slighted, but instead of letting this slight show, she decided to take it in a different way. She decided that no one in the casita and no one in the village was ever allowed to talk about Bruno until Bruno came to her. Bruno was going to have to step up and talk to Abuela first before anybody was allowed to acknowledge that Bruno even existed. And I think a lot of us can understand that feeling, whether it actually happened to us or not. A lot of us can understand that there's times where we feel like we're disconnected from our parents because of something we've done wrong. And whether Bruno internalized this or Abuela internalized this incorrectly, I think this is exactly what happened, is that Abuela felt slighted, and so she didn't want anybody talking about Bruno. And I think she set this rule, and it permeated throughout the entire house. And we also see that Abuela is kind of held to a high regard by the entire village. When the magic starts going out, the village comes to her.
Señora, perdón. People in town are becoming anxious about the magic. They want to see you.
And so she's held in a high regard. And so if she asks the village not to talk about Bruno, I think that they also would abide by that rule. Not because of the bad visions that he gives, but because they want to stay on the Madrigal's good side. They want to stay in favor of the Madrigals. And so Abuela setting this rule makes so much sense. But I still think she knew Bruno was at home. And I think Delores likely told Abuela, given that Pepa and Felix didn't want anything to do with Bruno, that they held this animosity partially due to the rule that Abuela had set up, but also probably partially due to the wedding. They don't want to talk about Bruno. And so Delores decides the one person she can talk to about Bruno would be Abuela. Abuela would want to know that Bruno was still there. And so she tells Abuela, hey, I know where Bruno is. Bruno's still inside the casita. I can show you where he is. And Abuela, not wanting to confront Bruno, but instead wanting Bruno to come to her, says, no, do not talk about Bruno. We're not going to bring it up. But she feels a bit of relief knowing Bruno's safe. Bruno is still at home, and the family is still together. Regardless of what the future is, she's not aware of what the vision is, but regardless of what was in the vision, she knows the family will face it together. I think this can be best seen in the final song when Delores does say, I knew he hadn't left. I heard him every day, it cuts to Abuela.
Yo, I knew he never left, I heard him every day.
She's not surprised by what Delores says. She was aware. She knew Bruno was at the Casita all along. Well, that's all I have for today. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed making it. I have absolutely fallen in love with the Encanto movie. If you guys want to see more theory videos like this, please make sure you're liking and subscribing to the channel. It just lets me know that you really do enjoy this kind of content. I will see you guys next week for another Encanto video. Stay stealthy, pack.